Look at this growing cluster of data points. If you took every 16 to 24-year-old in the UK who is currently detached from both education and the workforce and put them in one place, they would form the third largest city in the country. That is nearly 1 million young people, a population bigger than Leeds or Glasgow, completely disconnected from the economy. This bar chart shows exactly how much of an outlier the UK has become. We are looking at a youth NEET rate, meaning not in education, employment, or training, of nearly 13%. That is well above the European average of 9% and triple the rate of peer nations like the Netherlands. It is tempting for society to write this off as a temporary phase, or to blame a generation distracted by screens and supposedly lacking a work ethic. But the data suggests something more systemic. This represents a structural failure in how the state manages the transition to adulthood, leaving nearly 1 in 8 young people stranded without a clear path forward. To understand how we got here, we must look at a shift in recent macroeconomic data. The majority of these detached young people are no longer classified as unemployed. Instead, they fall into a specific category called economically inactive. Being economically inactive means they are completely out of the labor force. They do not have a job, and they are not actively looking for one. In fact, over 60% of this group have never held a job in their lives. The system has allowed a massive portion of an entire generation to fall away before they even reach the starting line of the economy. The fracture begins here. The modern school experience has evolved into an exam factory. It prioritizes standardized test scores over the practical foundations required to navigate a 21st century career. Look at this breakdown of educational pathways. In the UK, only 22% of young people are enrolled in practical vocational education. Compare that to successful peer nations like Germany and Denmark, where 35% of students are actively learning a trade. When young people fail to fit the narrow academic mold, they are rarely offered personalized guidance toward alternative routes. The typical institutional response is simply isolation. By the time they turn 18, the education system effectively releases them into the adult world, carrying a shattered sense of confidence and very few practical skills. In the past, the gap between school and a career was bridged by informal entry routes, like a weekend retail job that built early social skills. But as these closed storefronts show, those physical entry-level opportunities have largely vanished, a trend accelerated by the pandemic. Formal alternative pathways have also collapsed. Over the last few years, a number of youth apprenticeship starts has plummeted by over 40%. Young applicants are now forced into a remote, automated hiring process. Digital filters instantly screen out and disintegrate their CVs because they lack prior experience for roles that are specifically advertised as entry-level. They submit dozens, sometimes hundreds of applications. The response is almost always total silence, which drains away any remaining motivation to keep trying. The bottom rungs of the career ladder have been replaced by an automated wall that young people cannot climb. This graph reveals a critical shift. Health-related inactivity has spiked dramatically above youth unemployment, increasing by 70%. Isolating the data shows this is driven primarily by anxiety, depression, and neurodivergence. These conditions, compounded by constant rejection, make navigating adulthood impossible without tailored support. Faced with this health crisis, the welfare state acts as a passive trap. Institutions like the Job Center replace a young person's income, but they demand nothing and offer almost no actual pathways back to participation. Administrative records show that 300,000 young benefit claimants have zero requirements to engage with work support. Another 314,000 are entirely hidden, completely uncounted by the state, and receiving no help at all. The health and welfare systems serve as a final holding pen. They take a completely treatable crisis of confidence and turn it into a permanent sentence of economic inactivity. Underlying all of this is what policy experts call the deficit model. Our institutions evaluate young people based entirely on what they cannot do, paying them for their incapacity rather than investing in their potential. Look at this financial counter. This approach guarantees personal economic ruin. Remaining detached from the workforce at age 24 costs an individual up to £300,000 in lost lifetime earnings. When you add it all up, the lost tax revenue, the welfare payments, and the health costs, this crisis is draining £125 billion from the economy every year. The UK cannot afford to throw away the potential of 1 million of its own citizens. The most important reality of this crisis is buried in the survey data. 84% of these young people actively want to find work or education. The ambition is already there. It is the infrastructure that is missing. Addressing this requires integrating specialist mental health clinics directly into job centers, mandating that 2/3 of the apprenticeship levy is reserved for workers under 25, and moving away from passive benefit checks toward mandatory one-on-one participation support. Society must stop blaming a generation for failing to cross a bridge that the state never finished building. To save the country's economic future, we have to actually build the systems that guide them.